Hello and welcome to the Jackson Bleachers podcast. This is the first one we've done in a while, but we are finally back. Tennessee football is finally back. We have just barely over a week to wait until the season starts, and could be a long season. Hopefully it's a fun season, and we got the preview of that season right now. Since the last time that Tennessee has taken the field, a whole lot has happened. Got a new coach, new AD, all new staff, a bunch of new players, and it's a good thing that Tennessee has a new coaching staff, because last year, coming off the worst season in the history of Tennessee football, going 4-8, and then on top of all of that, you have the disaster that was the coaching search. Then John Curry, the athletic director at the time, was fired. He's replaced by Phil Fulmer. Everything kind of comes when Fulmer comes in. He stabilizes everything. They finally land on Jeremy Pruitt, and that was that. But I think that last season, and this is all relevant for this year, because you have to keep in mind how bad Tennessee was last year, how the coaching search went as you get ready for this season. And you got to have patience. I think that last season, the coaching search at the end of the year was maybe the lowest point ever in Tennessee football history. Definitely the lowest point in the last decade. But it does finally feel like Tennessee is back, with Fulmer at the head of the athletic department, and with a guy that actually, he knows football. There's none of this brick by brick, team 118, none of that crap. It's just football. And I think they finally are back. It feels good to watch it, to go into a Tennessee season thinking that your coach isn't a goober and he may actually be able to win some football games. But with all that being said, Tennessee fans need to have realistic expectations going into this season, because you can't overcome everything that they did in the offseason, all that time, all that disaster of a couple of weeks Tennessee was in the news, and then come off a 4-8 season with basically the same players and expect to go 10-2. That's just not going to happen. But having said that, Butch Jones did not leave Pruitt with a terrible roster. It's actually a fairly decent roster, but the problem is, while Butch Jones was in Knoxville, he was a terrible player developer, which means you have all this raw talent, but it's underdeveloped. And so the question now is, how fast can Pruitt develop that talent that was not developed under the previous coaching staff? I think there will be an improvement, obviously, this year, because it seems, at least from the outside looking in, that Pruitt does know how to develop talent. But I mean, at the very least, you can't be worse than the previous coaching staff was. So it can't be any worse. There's only one direction to go, and that's up. But how much time and how big of an improvement do they make? I think the goal for Tennessee, just before we even get into the schedule, I think the goal needs to be bowl eligibility. I don't ever want to say, 6-6 is a good goal, but at this point, looking at everything Tennessee's been through, I think 6-6 is it would be a very good season. I would hope for better. I think everybody would hope for better, but 6-6 right now would be, like, you're telling me, what is it, August 22nd? I would take 6-6 right now in a heartbeat. But before we get too deep into expectations, we're going to run through the schedule real fast. Obviously, I think everybody knows kickoff is next Saturday in Charlotte. First game against West Virginia. That is at 2:30 Central Time on CBS. Then the next Saturday, the 8th, is the home opener. First game at Neyland Stadium. That's at 3 o'clock Central Time against East Tennessee State. And then the following Saturday, September 15th, is the last non-conference game before we get into conference play. That is a 11 a.m. Central Time kick against UTEP in Knoxville. So after that, the schedule gets... West Virginia is obviously a tough game, but the schedule really gets tough after UTEP leaves town. September 22nd, Pruitt's first SEC game as a head coach. Tennessee hosts the Florida Gators. The time for that has not been set yet, but you can guess. You can pretty much guarantee that's going to be either a 2:30 or a night game. Don't see that one being an 11 a.m. game. That one is in Knoxville. Then the following Saturday, you go to Athens to play the reigning SEC East champs, the Georgia Bulldogs, on the 29th. Then you got your bye week after the Georgia game. That first weekend in October is the bye week. Coming off the bye week, you travel to the Plains, you play at Auburn, and then immediately after playing Auburn, you go back home and play Alabama. So that stretch of Florida and then at Georgia back-to-back, and then you have at Auburn and then versus Alabama back-to-back, I don't think there's a tougher stretch in all football all year than what Tennessee has to deal with right there. That's what happens when your permanent crossover game is Alabama and your rotation crossover game this year is at Auburn. That's just brutal. That's Pruitt's first 4 games in the SEC as a head coach. You can't ask for a tougher schedule. The schedule makers did Tennessee no favors there, and the schedule has to get a little bit easier because there's not Georgia, Auburn's, Alabama's all over your schedule, but still, even after you feel like you finally get a break after you play Alabama, you got to go to Columbia to play South Carolina the very next Saturday. So just a brutal schedule. Then you finally kind of do get a break November 3rd at home versus Charlotte. I think that's homecoming, but I don't know for sure. The following Saturday, home against Kentucky. And then they wrap up the home schedule on November 17th against Missouri. Finish the season on the road at Vanderbilt on November 24th in what is basically a home game in Nashville. It'll be 90% orange, no matter how good or bad Tennessee is and how good or bad Vanderbilt is. But again, the highlighted part of the schedule is September 22nd through October 20th. Good news is you have a bye week in there. The bad news is you have Florida, then at Georgia. Then that's your bye week after Georgia. And then you come back at Auburn and at home against Alabama back-to-back. That's just insane. And that's just – there's no way that a team – you go into that hoping for 2-2. Realistic, there's a real good shot at 0-4. I think they go 1-3, but you hope if Tennessee goes 2-2 through that part of the schedule, have a parade. That would be amazing. So now we're going to kind of break this thing down into games Tennessee should win. Before we break it down into that, Vegas currently has the Vols win total at 6.5 games this season. I think that Tennessee will be somewhere very worst case 5-7, very best case 7-5. I don't see how there's any way they go better than 7-5. If I had to put money on it right now, I would take the under 6.5 and go 6-6. But hoping for better than 6-6, obviously. But the games Tennessee should win: that first home game, East Tennessee State; that second home game, UTEP; that game in November against Charlotte. Those are your 3 non-conference cupcakes that every Power 5 should win. Doesn't mean they will, but Tennessee should handle those 3 teams with no problem. Then you got Kentucky at home. I think if the game's in Lexington this year, this is more of a toss-up, but with it being in Knoxville, I think Tennessee should win that game. And then at Vanderbilt, you can't lose to Vanderbilt again. Everybody's tired of losing to Vanderbilt. All the players will be fired up for that game. It's on the road, but not really. And then, so those are the games you should win: UTEP, Charlotte, East Tennessee State, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. The games that you're just pray nobody gets hurt and let's not get embarrassed. The probable losses here is at Georgia, at Auburn, and Alabama. Those 3 games you can go on and put. So if you can go on and mark down 3 losses for that. So if you go with the should win and should lose games, Tennessee would be sitting at 5-3, and that gives you 4 toss-up games for the Vols. And your toss-up games would be this opening game, West Virginia. That game is at the Panther Stadium in Charlotte. And then your first conference game at home against Florida, which I think the Florida game that's the biggest game of the season. It's a swing game because who knows what happens with West Virginia, but it's not a conference game. Florida's your first conference game. At worst case, going into the Florida game, you'll be 2-1. Best case, hopefully you're 3-0, but worst case, you're 2-1. You beat Florida, you're either 3-1 or 4-0, and you're 1-0 in the conference. That's huge. It's a confidence builder. It's the coaching staff's first rivalry game, and it's their first SEC game, period. So That's going to be a massive game for the Vols, biggest of the year for me. The fourth toss-up game is at South Carolina. I think South Carolina is going to be good. I wouldn't want to put that, do I think they're going to win the game? No, but I'm not putting that as a game that I'm counting on a loss. So it's not really a true toss-up. I don't expect Tennessee to win the game, but I'm not going into that marking like, no way. Let's just get out of there. Don't get embarrassed, because they can win. That'll be late enough in the season. The date of that game is October 27th. Last game in October. By that point in the season, Tennessee can win that game. Are they the better team? At this point, no, definitely not. But they can win that game. And then your last toss-up game, Missouri. Drew Lock right now is one of the favorites. He's on some Heisman watch lists. He's going to be one of the top couple quarterbacks taken in the draft next year, as long as he doesn't get hurt. But I don't really think he has a whole lot of other help to work with. And we all know who his quarterback coach is. That would be Derek Dooley. And I don't think anybody in Knoxville is jealous of that. But so about a week and a half out, I think Tennessee goes 6-6. I think worst case is 5-7. Best case is 7-5. And there's going to be a whole lot of growing pains this season, but you just got to be patient. It can't be any worse than last year. It can't be worse than that coaching search was. Just be patient, stick with it. Everything will work out eventually. I think Pruitt's the guy, but he deserves time. He deserves time just like anybody else would get time, because it isn't his fault that Tennessee fans have suffered through the last 10 years that they have. That's not his fault at all. He's trying to fix it. Give him a fair chance to fix it. But, with Tennessee, the schedule isn't doing them any favors either. So now we've ran through the schedule. I've given you my win total predictions. We're going to go through the offense real fast, an offensive preview. And I think everybody knows the big story with the offense in the going into fall camp was the quarterbacks, and we will get to that in just a minute, who's going to start at quarterback, because for the second year in a row we have another quarterback controversy, or not necessarily a controversy, but a quarterback battle in fall camp. But with last year, Tennessee's offense for the first time had to transition to life without Josh Dobbs. And I think all the Tennessee fans knew how good Dobbs was, but last year really showed how good he was. He was underrated. Everybody knew he was good, but he was underrated in Knoxville. He was, believe it or not, underappreciated. And last year we just saw how good he was, because Garantano, Dormady, and even McBride, even though he didn't really have a fair chance at it, nobody was able to step up and be the guy at quarterback. Nobody was able to take over a game when you needed it. Nobody could get you that big third down conversion when you needed it. And yeah, the offensive line struggled. That was a big part of it. And I think it really showed last year how much Dobbs helped with his legs too, to be able to hide the weakness of the offensive line. But the quarterbacks are they struggled all year last year. But good news, that season's over. It's a brand new season. And even better news, Butch Jones and his staff are gone. I think your new offensive coordinator is Tyson Helton. And Helton's expected to run more of a pro-style offense. And hopefully that'll cut out on a lot of the stupidity that has made Tennessee fans be driven up the wall recently. Like just stupidity, like lining up on the shotgun inside the 1 yard line, or passing the ball 3 straight times while they're inside the 3 yard line at the Swamp. But so what can you expect from the at least the Vols offensive coaching staff in 2018? I would say they're going to be competent. They're not going to do stupid stuff like that. I wouldn't expect kicking an extra point when you're up 11 points in the fourth quarter. I would expect you go for 2. Just same stupid stuff that we've had to deal with the last few years. Hopefully that's over. But just because you do have all new coaches does not mean that the offensive issues will be solved. Because for the most part, you have a ton of the same players. And as we talked about a little earlier, they got screwed when it came to development under Butch Jones. So it's almost like they're all freshmen again. And as we mentioned a minute ago, the story we don't know, the question we don't know the answer to, who will start at quarterback. Last fall, Garantano and Dormady were in a quarterback battle. And I think everybody remembers Dormady ended up winning that battle, but then Garantano played most of the season. Dormady got hurt. Dormady actually transferred to Houston. This year, Garantano is battling it out with three other quarterbacks: Keller Crisp, Will McBride, and true freshman JT Shrout. I think we can mark off McBride and Shrout from there. I would not be surprised to see both of them be redshirted. I definitely think Shrout will be redshirted. I tend to think he's the future of the Vols, but you're not starting a true freshman this year. I don't think he's good enough there yet. Right now, in Vegas, Keller Crisp is the favorite to win the job. But I know in Knoxville, it looks like it's Garantano should be the favorite. That's word around Knoxville. But Pruitt and his staff are playing the cards close to the vest right now. We don't know which way they're going. We've heard rumors, but we haven't heard from any of them which way they're leaning. But we do know that Garantano had the benefit of going through spring practice with the new coaching staff, and he already had relationships that were established with a lot of the players on the offensive side of the ball. Chris was not able to practice in Knoxville in the spring because he was still working on graduating from Stanford. He does have a lot more experience, though, in actual games. He won all 6 of his starts back in 2016, but last year, KJ Costello took over down the stretch, and Chris went to the bench. As we mentioned a minute ago, Will McBride and Shrout are both involved in the battle, but not really. I'm expecting both of them to be redshirted. But to me, this season, you're just hoping for bowl eligibility. So I'm not playing for this season. I'm playing for the future of the program. So I think the starter this year needs to be determined by who gives you a better chance to win next year, and then in year 3. And if they think Garantano is the future of the program, start him this year, get him more reps. If they think Will McBride or JT Shrout is the future of the program, redshirt them. Keller Crisp is a graduate transfer, and he's a one and done for the Vols, but that doesn't mean that starting him is not the best thing for the future of the program. Because if you don't think Garantano is the future of the program, but you do think that it's a toss-up maybe between him and Chris now, you go towards Garantano. But if you truly believe that Shrout or McBride is the future of the program, redshirt either one of them, especially McBride, because he was on track to redshirt last year. Butch burned it like an idiot down the stretch. So neither one of them, I think, should be starters this year no matter what. But if you think that either one of them are the future of the Vols, go with Chris this year. Redshirt them. Go with Chris this year if you think he gives you the better chance to win this year. Because at that point, I mean, you need to try to win games. You need to actively be trying to win games. But you're not winning the SEC this year. You're not winning the championship this year. So why not build towards something in the future? We don't know when a starter will be named or even if one will be named. But, and heck, we even learned last year that just because a starter starts opening day does not guarantee they keep their job the whole season. Just ask Quentin Dormady about that. He was a starter this time last year. He's not even with the program anymore. He is now a Houston Cougar. But one place that we are not worried about who the starter is going to be is at running back. Tennessee, if you look at their history, they've always had good running backs, and this year is no exception. Sophomore Ty Chandler is expected to be the starter, and he had a good season last year backing up John Kelly. He did get one start last year, and it came in Lexington against the Wildcats. And even though we all remember Tennessee losing that game down the stretch, Chandler was a huge bright spot. and he's poised to have a breakout 2018. I think he may be one of the better running backs in all the SEC, and he will be a household name by the end of the season. He's just that good. And then behind, he figures to be your number one back. But behind him, you have graduate transfer Madre London, who came in for Michigan State, where he was really good at the beginning of his career, but he was just never able to stay healthy. If he finally can stay healthy, he's going to be a great option at number 2 running the ball. But even if he can't stay healthy, if nothing else, with as young as this roster is, as young as the rest of the running backs are, he's going to be a huge plus in the locker room. And he's going to be a difference maker for the Vols, whether it's on the field, in the locker room, or both. And then you look back at the younger guys. You got Tim Jordan. He's another sophomore, and he's going to be in the mix for some carries. He wasn't real highly recruited out of high school, but he has started to prove himself in a big way on the practice field. And he'll be behind Ty Chandler and Madre London, but he'll have some chances, whether it's injuries, whatever. Even if everybody does stay healthy, Tim Jordan will get on the field. And if he can make the most of those opportunities, he'll have plenty of carries. So running backs, plenty of running backs. They're young, but they're talented. It's a bright spot. Wide receiver is another real big bright spot for this Tennessee team. You got plenty of star power there. Plenty of guys that when they catch a ball for the first time this year, fans are going to be like, oh, yeah, I remember him. And you got 4 big juniors, 3 sophomores, and a couple of freshmen. But yeah, so Jawan Jennings obviously is your number 1 wide receiver. He is finally back after missing just about all of last season after getting hurt in that first game on Labor Day against Georgia Tech. His Tennessee career looked like it was over back in November when Brady Hoke, who is the interim head coach at that point, kicked him off the team because of social media. I think it was a video that went around of him. He had some negative comments to say about Butch Jones and that previous coaching staff, which I still don't know how in the world an interim coach had the ability to kick somebody off the team, especially when he knows he's on his way out any day. But the dumpster fire that was the athletic department let it happen. And even more than kicking him out, Jennings was right. Like, that coaching staff was terrible. The way he went about it probably wasn't smart, but what he had to say was valid, and he got punished for it by a coach who should have had no power to do that. But luckily for the football program, and luckily for Jennings, and luckily for the Tennessee fans, Fulmer took power, hired Jeremy Pruitt. They agreed to let him return to the program, and he's set for a big year. And I expect him to produce big down the stretch for the Vols. Marquez Callaway will be another guy that needs to be relied on heavily this year. And he proved how valuable he could be last year against Georgia Tech, too. He reeled in 4 receptions for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns in Atlanta. But like the rest of the offense, he fell off the map as the season went along. He has all the tools needed to be a superstar receiver, but the Tennessee quarterbacks just never threw the ball to him. And I don't know if that was lack of leadership and experience from the quarterbacks or just downright bad coaching, maybe a mix of both, who knows. But the new coaching staff definitely has seen how valuable of an asset Callaway can be, and I expect him to get the ball a ton. That should be one of the focus areas of this offense going into the season, would be to get playmakers like Callaway and even Jennings the ball when it matters the most. Because they'll get most of the attention, they'll get the headlines, but then you still got guys like Brandon Johnson and Tyler Bird and Josh Palmer who will get their chances too. Brandon Johnson had a huge year out of nowhere last year, and Tyler Bird and Josh Palmer have both proven they can make big catches in tough spots. So the wide receivers and running backs, I think Tennessee's set in your skill positions. The question is, do they have a quarterback that can get the ball to them? And who will that quarterback be? Also, another place going into the season where there's not really a whole lot of questions about is tight ends, but the difference is you're not really going to know who these guys are where you did with the wide receivers. With the overall lack of experience at tight end, I think it's pretty obvious to me anyway that JUCO transfer Dominic Wood Anderson will be the number 1 tight end this year, unless he gets hurt. And then I think Eli Wolf will be your number 2 tight end. Wood Anderson transferred from Arizona Western College. That's a community college. And he will still have 2 years of eligibility left in Knoxville. 247 Sports had him as the 10th best JUCO player in the 2018 class and the 2nd best JUCO tight end. Alabama, Auburn, and A&M all wanted him. A whole lot of other Power 5 programs wanted him, but he chose Knoxville instead. It's a big get for Pruitt and the Vols. Pruitt and Helton love tight ends, and they needed a big tight end like Wood Anderson. Second tight end, as we said a minute ago, Eli Wolf. And his name may sound familiar to Tennessee fans because his brother Ethan was a 4-year starter, and he's now a tight end on the Titans roster. Eli, the younger brother that's still there, is now a redshirt junior, and he will finally get his chance to prove that he will be your every down tight end in the SEC. And the fact that a guy that Eli Wolf, who most people don't really know a whole lot about, was one of the 3 players Jeremy Pruitt took with him to SEC Media Days in Atlanta, says that Pruitt's going to rely on him to be a big part of this Tennessee offense, and that he thinks he's ready. But so the tight ends, another spot where you pretty much know who's going to be there, but a lot of casual fans won't really be familiar with either guy because they haven't had, in Wood Anderson's experience, no experience as a Vol, and Eli Wolf, not a whole lot. So then one more spot on the offense, that would be the offensive line. It was absolutely terrible last year. But the good news, again, with as bad as they were, there's no way they can't be any better this year. Like, there's nowhere to go but up, so they have to be better. And with an overall bad year, by far the biggest positive to come out of that offensive line last year was the emergence of Trey Smith. Everybody here in West Tennessee already knew how good he was and that he was as good, if not better, than any O-lineman in the country. But the rest of the college football world did not get introduced to him, the former USJ Bruin, that is, until last fall. The true freshman, he appeared in all 12 games and even had to play 4 positions. Going into this season, he was selected to the preseason All-SEC first team back in July. And that's even with him at the time not knowing if he would get to play this year because he missed all spring and summer with we didn't know it at the time. It was just called a condition. But we found out after he was cleared to play a couple weeks ago that he had blood clots in his lungs. Smith will definitely be the best player on the line this year, and it's not even going to be close. And a big addition, though, to this line is junior Brandon Kennedy came over from Alabama this summer, and he'll have an immediate impact. Even though he's already graduated from the University of Alabama, he still has 2 years of eligibility left, and that's big for these Vols. Drew Richmond is another junior. He's got to step up this season. His Tennessee career has not been great. There were a lot of high hopes for him. He's kind of underwhelmed, and it seems like it's a make-or-break year for Richmond. He's got to do something this year. Chance Hall will be a valuable piece to the puzzle if he can stay healthy, but he missed all last season. Also look for Jameer Johnson, Ryan Johnson, and Riley Locklear. They're all sophomores, and they'll probably get some action in the trenches this season. But like the Tennessee defense, like Tennessee as a whole, this offense deserves patience from the fan base. At least as of right now, no great option at quarterback. The line's going to struggle definitely early. Hopefully they get better down the stretch. But they do have some good young running backs and plenty of playmakers at wide receivers. So there's reason to have hope and think they can improve by the end of the year. But you need to see how bright this future is, how Tennessee's finally trending in the right direction offensively, and have some patience. Because maybe a long season, maybe a frustrating season, but they're finally on the right track. So that was our look at the offensive side of the ball. Now we're going to take a quick look at the defensive side of the ball real fast. Pruitt did hire Kevin Scherer as the defense coordinator. Pruitt himself was a defensive coordinator, and he'll run multiple defensive schemes, but they're going to use a 3-4 a whole lot. And long time, or not even long time, just Tennessee fans in general are familiar with the 3-4. But the last time that the Vols used it was when Sal Sunseri was the defensive coordinator during Derek Dooley's last year on Rocky Top, and I don't think anybody needs a reminder of how that played out. But even with the lack of success that the Big Orange have had with the 3-4 in the past, Pruitt and his new defensive coordinator will use it a lot this season. He's had a ton of success with it at Georgia and Alabama, so why couldn't it work here? He's made it work at every other place he's been. Why can't it work in Knoxville? I think it can. It just may be a tough transition year this year. But we'll start with the secondary here on these position breakdowns. And specifically, I think the cornerback position may be the weakest link on the entire team. Not because of lack of talent. The talent's there, but there's just no experience and there's not a whole lot of depth. But the good news for us, Jeremy Pruitt was a DB in college. He was a DB's coach at Alabama before he was a defensive coordinator. So he knows what he's talking about and he knows how to coach up secondaries. And as you'd probably assume with a team with a lack of experience at secondary, there are no senior cornerbacks, and Balin Buchanan is the only junior. The Tennessee Vols have a combined total of 2 starts to college games at corner. One from Buchanan and the other one from Sean Schamberger. And that Schamberger start came last year. He had to step in at the last minute in Tuscaloosa. He held his own, but he's definitely going to be relied on this year. He's going to have to be your every day, your every Saturday, one of your starting corners. Then other corners who will be in the rotation are these two are sophomores, Cheyenne LaBruza and Kenneth George Jr. They'll have to step up. LaBruza got a little bit of playing time last year, not a whole lot. And Kenneth George Jr. actually got a ton of playing time, but it all came in JUCO at Trinity Valley Community College. But at least he got reps, he got starting reps, and the Vols will be relying on him some this year. Big in-state recruit, freshman Alante Taylor, he'll have his shot to be in the rotation at corner. He's a 4-star cornerback out of Manchester, Tennessee. This time last year, he was playing for Coffee County Central High School, and he was a pretty good receiver in high school, but Pruitt decided he'd rather have him as a full-time corner. But so that's the look at corners. A whole lot of question marks, but as many questions as you have about corners, the safeties look to be pretty solid. You got Micah Abernathy, Nigel Warrior, and Todd Kelly Jr. will be your 3 main safeties. They'll take up the majority of the playing time. Hopefully they all stay healthy. Last year, TK Jr. missed almost all of last season, but a medical redshirt allowed him to return as a 5th-year senior. So he is back on Rocky Top this year. Micah Abernathy is the other senior safety, and he's definitely had some up and downs this year, or over his career, specifically getting beat on the Hail Mary against Florida last year. Nigel Warrior, he had a big season last year, kind of came out of nowhere, and I think he'll end up being the best safety on the roster by the end of this season. Look for him to have a huge year. And even though you have a solid first 3 safeties, there's still some open rotation spots to be filled with guys like Theo Jackson, Marquill Osborne, and even Malik Gray. But there's a possibility that Malik Gray will be transitioned into cornerback since the Vols are so thin at that position. Trayvon Flowers is a freshman who big things are expected from him down the road, but he probably won't get a real shot at it this season, at least at safety. He may actually get to play on special teams, though. That'd be nice for him and nice for us to be able to see him. So there's your look at the secondary. We'll shift now to the linebackers, who with the transition from the 4-3 to the 3-4, there's a whole lot of transitioning there. A bunch of guys moved from the line to linebackers, so a lot of body changing. They're gonna be one of the more interesting positions to watch on the field this year. Obviously, with the 3-4, that's one more linebacker and one less lineman. So, but not really. You move your defensive end to outside linebackers, and they're rushing from there. I mean, that's not really the exact way to describe it, but it's the oversimplification of what it is. But we know Tennessee's going to have to rely on Jonathan Kongbo. We know they're going to have to rely on Cortez Sapp. We know Darren Kirkland Jr. is going to have to make some plays. And Daniel Patulli really came on strong last year, but what about everybody else? Austin Smith and Darrell Taylor are two juniors that should see playing time this year. And sophomores DeAndre Johnson and Jordan Allen could also see the field a little bit. So those are some linebackers there that need to make plays. It's going to be really interesting to watch that. But the biggest story by far of the linebackers is actually nowhere even close to the practice field, and that would be J.J. Peterson, the number one recruit in Pruitt's first class, has still not reported to Knoxville yet. A whole lot of people, including me, were hoping that he could make an immediate impact for Tennessee this year. But with each day that passes and him not being on Rocky Top, the more unlikely that is. Saturday, Tennessee had a scrimmage. That night after the scrimmage, Pruitt addressed it to the media, and he said that the holdup is one summer class he has to finish before he can head to Knoxville. And once that's over, he will be there. How accurate is that? I don't know, but we got to trust him because Tennessee needs him. They need him on campus as soon as possible, and the longer he goes not being there, the more likely it is that he will be redshirted and not get to play this year. But similar to the linebackers, the defensive linemen have to make major changes to adjust to the 3-4, and with one less man on the line of scrimmage, it makes everyone's job a little bit more tough. Now, on this Tennessee D line, you got two West Tennessee kids that are hoping to have a major impact. And one of them is Emmett Gooden from Brownsville. He went to Haywood. And the other one is Greg Emerson from Jackson, who went to Northside. Emmett Gooden is well known around the country for – he was actually on the newest season of Last Chance U on Netflix. He's been in Independence, Kansas at Independence Community College the last couple of years playing under Jason Brown. And he's finally back in his home state. He's in Knoxville and hoping to get immediate playing time on the D-line this year. Greg Emerson is a freshman. He's the one that went to Northside here in Jackson, and he suffered a nasty foot injury last summer up in Oregon, but he's healthy and ready to go for his first collegiate season. And I think he's going to have a really good career in Knoxville. Whether he gets a whole lot of playing time now or whether it's down the road a little bit, I don't know, but he will be good eventually for Tennessee. Outside of the West Tennessee kids, we know Shy Tuttle and Kyle Phillips pretty much have starting jobs locked up. But who else will be called on to play defensive line? I think Alexis Johnson, Kevin Bennett, and Matthew Butler are all expected to rotate in and out. But there's a whole lot of question marks there. Not quite as many as corner, but a whole lot of question marks there. So there's your look at position by position to the defense. Just to kind of recap, with a completely new coaching staff and system, I don't think anybody's expecting Tennessee's defense to be dominant right off the bat. There's too much inexperience and a whole lot of position shifting that there's no way it's going to move smooth enough for them to be a dominant force immediately. So, just like the offense, fans need to be patient, especially early in the season, and hope to see significant improvement by the end of the year. Expect a little bit of frustration, especially at the beginning of the year, but with the defensive brains that are on this coaching staff and the young talent the Vols have, the future looks extremely bright, just like it does with the offense. So, we have been through the schedule. We have talked about the new coaches. We've given some realistic expectations. We've broken down the offense. We've broken down the defense. And that means the last thing left, real quickly, is special teams. Tennessee special teams have been up and down, especially field goal kicking. Aaron Medley's gone. He's been there forever. I mean, it felt like forever. It was 4 years. But Brent Samaglia will take over as your full-time starting kicker. He actually got a little bit of run last year because Medley was hurt. So some of his notable freshman stats, he was 8 of 13 with field goals, and he was perfect 3 for 3 with extra points. His long as a freshman last year was a 51-yarder in the swamp. His low point of the season was a 0-2 performance against UMass, but he followed that up the next week, going 3 for 3 against South Carolina. So Brent Samaglia will handle kickoffs, extra points, field goals, all of that kind of stuff. True freshman Paxton Brooks is expected to be the punter. He's from South Carolina. The long snappers should continue to be Riley Lovingood. He's had that under control for a couple of years now. Your short snapper is Elijah Medford. And now here's the fun part. Who are the possible return men? Ty Chandler returned the ball some last year, so I think he's obviously a candidate to return. I would also look at Tim Jordan, Marquez Callaway, and maybe even Malik Gray. But who knows? Special teams have been a problem for the Vols in the past, but they've also, back in the Dooley days, they were a big advantage for the Vols in the past. So hopefully everything will get figured out. There's a week until kickoff. Tennessee football is finally back. So just be patient. It'll be a long season, hopefully a fun season, but be patient. Tennessee finally has a bright future, and everything is starting to turn around on Rocky Top. It's just going to take some time. But thank you for listening, and join us next week on the Jackson Bleachers podcast.